We have done a list of known issues and common problems for various dirt bikes. Now it's time to look at the Austrian pumpkins. A common criticism of KTM and Husqvarna is they bring out some of their innovations too soon and customers become their guinea pigs, resulting in a lot of recalls and ongoing problems. Or you can buy a Japanese bike, which usually has barely changed in 15 years, but has far less known issues. Frankly, I'm not sure how true this is, but at least it makes sense to know what the known issues are with any brand and fix them before they become a problem. Let's start with product recalls from KTM and Husqvarna. These are the more serious problems because riders can get hurt, so the accountants and lawyers work out the potential cost of getting sued versus the cost of actually fixing the mistakes. If it's cheaper to just fix the bike, they will issue a recall. On earlier models, you can see certain bikes had potential problems with fuel leaks, front forks seizing, front forks snapping, throttles locking open, or loss of braking. More recently, there are still potential problems with fuel leaks and impaired braking, but also new issues with spokes, connecting rods, and rear shocks with certain models. Remember, these issues don't affect every model. Sometimes it will only be in a certain batch produced that year. Check with your dealer for more information. There are a lot of recalls on KTM street bikes too, but we'll leave that for someone else to cover. Next are all the issues not serious enough to issue a product recall. Each year, KTM dealers receive a list of these problems, which we can't access, but occasionally you'll see them pop up on forums, like this one. So it comes down to scouring the forums, chatting with owners, mechanics, and trying to sort out the truth from the alarming amount of bullshit on the internet. Until the new design in 2017, the two-stroke starter motors were widely seen as very unreliable, weak designs that needed frequent maintenance. We've done a whole video about keeping those suckers working. Just Google this. Thankfully, the new design seems to be working well. Apart from product recalls on certain 4CS forks, they were widely criticised for being much worse than earlier forks. I spoke with the suspension specialists at FFRC. They tested them on their dyno and said it looked as though the KTM crew just went to lunch and never finished the design properly. There are various fixes available. Check out this video. A minor but persistent problem, the weak side stand on the Enduro models. In the quest for lightweight, most European bikes do have weak side stands. KTM are probably the worst. If it falls off, just buy a decent aftermarket one. A fairly rare issue on the 17 models, the weak idler gear. It would be much more common if riders used their kickstarters a lot. Some riders were finding this even broke on their first ride. The best fix possible is use a longer bolt and tap the thread to make more room for this. KTM have fixed it for 2018 and also redesigned the engine case to provide more support. Also for 2017, KTM switched from the mostly trouble-free Keihin carburetor to the Mikuni. Many riders have reported issues with jetting, incorrect installation and float level problems. Eventually, KTM released a technical bulletin to hopefully fix these issues. See your dealer for more info. Also in 2017, KTM began using their own reed valves, and there have been quite a lot of complaints about these breaking or not sealing properly. Some riders have swapped over to the V-Force aftermarket option, which has stronger reeds, a better seal, reed stops and better airflow. Going back in time, KTM freeride airboxes were badly designed. In wet weather, the rear wheel would throw water up into the airbox and eventually drown the engine. Google around for info on how owners designed plastic flaps to prevent this. Back in 2011, there was some very handy info posted by the guys at Stillwell Performance after years of racing KTMs. Bear in mind, some of these may have been fixed in later models. But back to the new models, TPI and oil injection. Quite a few riders had their oil tanks splitting, and KTM were investigated by the UK Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. KTM said they made a slight misalignment and over-tightening of the oil tank mounting screws, which they say is now fixed. If you have a 2017 TPI model, keep an eye on this. See your dealer to replace any split oil tanks. The TPI itself. In 2017, plenty of riders reported their bikes were running perfectly, but a substantial number reported issues with starting, idling, and running too lean. There have been mapping upgrades. Hopefully these apply for the 2018 models. Jeff Slavens has a useful video on his YouTube channel. Also, KTM did not provide a certain part needed to bleed the TPI system and prime the oil pump. Again, Jeff Slavens has come to the rescue on how to fix this. Many of the 4-stroke models use a hydraulic cam chain tensioner. In isolated cases, a worn chain can jump teeth with fluctuations in oil pressure. But more commonly, the engine will just be noisy when first started until the oil pressure rises. Some riders fit an aftermarket tensioner to avoid these problems. What about KTM frames breaking? Guys love posting these photos online and saying KTM has gone too far with trying to reduce weight. Possibly this may be true. But note, these are mostly for motocross bikes, and you can probably find similar motocross pics of broken bikes from any brand. I think a lot more evidence is required before making any judgments on this. Talking of evidence though, a fair number of KTM 1190 riders are reporting cracks or breaks in the frame gussets under their seats. Prices. I'm not sure what's happening in the rest of the world, but in Australia, KTMs and especially Husqvarnas are getting bloody expensive. It just gets worse when you add $1,000 for a TPI model. I know many riders now say they will look at Gas, Sherco or Beta next time around. Look, obviously if your brand is popular, milk the market for what you can. But I really think they are pricing themselves out of the Australian market. Also, KTM parts were expensive years ago. I can remember them charging $60 for an NGK Group 1 spark plug, the identical one, $15 in the Beta shop. KTM did a big price drop here a few years back, but they still ain't cheap by a long shot. Neither are Sherco parts. I think both Sherco and KTM could learn a lot from Gas, Beta, and of course the Japanese on their parts pricing. So, are we KTM's lab rats and guinea pigs? Well, possibly with some of their innovations, but generally I think all manufacturers will hit unexpected problems when they make changes to their models. The reality is all the bikes are amazing nowadays, but they just have their known issues if you dig deep enough. I must admit though, Gas seem to have fewer than most and are now the cheapest in Australia, so I might be going Spanish next time around. Hasta la vista.